The early morning wind swept through the valley, carrying with it a bitter chill and the metallic scent of dried blood. Elias Ward pulled back on the reins, his silver-gray eyes squinting as the wooden gate of the inherited cabin came into view. For a moment, he thought his eyes were deceiving him. 5 women hung from ropes, suspended like grim warnings right in front of the gate. Their tattered dresses fluttered in the wind, hair falling over their faces, bare feet swaying with the rhythm of a funeral drum. Pinned to each chest was a rough wooden sign, the letters scorched into the grain with a knife, now clear in the dawn light. "This ain't your land. What belongs to Morrison will always belong to Morrison." Elias tightened his grip on the reins, his throat suddenly dry. This land had been left to him by Uncle Jeremiah, a chance at a new beginning after the long years of war. But what greeted him was not the warmth of a frontier cabin. It was 5 lifeless bodies hung like a punch straight to the gut. His horse neighed loudly, restless. Elias swung himself down, his boots landing heavy on the frozen ground. He stepped closer, calloused hand trembling as it reached for the neck of one of the women. A faint pulse responded. Then another. Still breathing. In that cold wind, a spark lit deep in Elias's chest. This was no longer about inheritance. This was a bloody challenge from a force looking to devour this entire land. And if he chose to cut those ropes, it meant he was stepping straight into a storm that was bound to swallow everything in its path, even if it cost him his own life. Thank you for letting me share this story with you tonight. Let us know where you are tuning in from. I hope, wherever you are safe. And may happiness always find its way to you. The blade in Elias's hand gleamed as it sliced clean through the first rope. The woman's limp body dropped, but he caught her just in time. Her neck bore the angry red mark of the noose, her breath faint but still there. Without stopping to think, Elias moved from one to the next, cutting each rope, lowering all 5 of them gently to the ground. They lay in a row before the cabin gate, their bodies ice-cold from the night air, but a few eyelids fluttered, caught between pain and unconsciousness. He flipped the knife and began cutting the bindings on their wrists and ankles. His hands trembled as he saw the bruises, flesh battered and stained, lashes crisscrossed like some cruel verdict etched into skin. Whoever did this had meant for them to die slow, to die in pain, and more importantly, to die as a warning to anyone foolish enough to set foot on this land. One by one, he dragged them under the cabin's front awning. Inside, it was pitch black, dust thick as mourning cloth, but there was enough room for 5 broken bodies to lie down. Elias lit a fire. The flickering yellow glow slowly brought their faces into view. The first black hair, sharp eyes even in delirium. A gash on her cheek spoke of a fighter who had battled to her very last breath. The second red hair, cracked lips, but her posture remained proud, defiant. The third slender frame, golden blonde hair, a gentle face that carried grace even through suffering. The fourth eyes dark as midnight, half-lidded but calculating, cloaked in mystery. The last older, chestnut hair, a calm presence like that of a mother protecting the others. Elias did not need to ask. He knew. They had not been hung there by chance. They were chosen, and whoever was behind it wanted him to know that loud and clear. Outside, the wind howled, carrying with it the bitter scent of rope and the lingering smoke of gunpowder. Elias sat with his back to the cabin door, his Winchester laid across his lap. The firelight flickered in his weathered silver eyes, calling back memories of wars he had sworn were behind him. But the West never lets a man choose peace so easily. Uncle Jeremiah used to say, "Land is not just bought with money. It has to be held with blood." And now, that truth stood plain before the cabin gate, in the form of 5 trembling bodies. In that still silence, Elias understood. There was no turning back. If he saved them, he would have to face the kind of men who could hang women like flags at a gate. And if he left them behind, he would no longer be a man. A hoarse, ragged cough shattered the silence. The black-haired woman opened her eyes first, flames flickering in the dark. Her neck was bruised deep red, her voice raw and broken, but it still came out like a command. "Do not leave us behind." Elias knelt beside her, gently pouring sips of water from his canteen into her parched mouth. She drank like she was swallowing life itself and all the despair that came with it. Once her breathing steadied, she sat up, her gaze sharp as a blade cutting straight through him. "Do you realize you are walking straight into a storm?" Before Elias could answer, more groans echoed through the cabin. The red-haired woman pushed herself upright, fury flaring in her piercing blue eyes. The blonde stirred awake, exhausted, but her hand clung to Elias's shirt, desperate for anything to hold on to. The older woman moved quietly, helping each of them, her steady presence revealing what Elias already sensed. She had been the one holding them together through hell, the cabin filled with ragged breaths and the soft crackle of fire. Elias poured more water, shared scraps of dry bread. No one said much, but their eyes all carried the same message: watchfulness and a test of trust. At last, the brown-haired woman spoke. Her voice was low, firm, and spoke for them all. We did not hang ourselves at that gate. That was a message from the man who owns this town now. He wants anyone setting foot here to see what it costs. Elias clenched his fist, knuckles going pale. He had suspected as much, but hearing it aloud made his blood boil. The redhead gave a bitter laugh, laced with fury and warning. If you have any sense, you will get back on that horse and ride far away. We are dead weight. If you take us in, you will die with us. Elias looked up, his silver-gray eyes scanning each face before he spoke, voice low and resolute. I cut those ropes. From that moment on, your fate is mine too. In the firelight, the black-haired woman pushed herself upright. Her lips curled into a tired, defiant smile. Then listen close, landowner. You did not just inherit a cabin. You just inherited a war. Her words dropped like gunfire in the night. And Elias knew, from that moment on, peace was no longer part of the bargain. The road ahead would not be about planting grass or raising cattle. It would be about blood and the shadows closing in around them. That night, the fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows across scarred faces. After water and makeshift bandages, the women slowly began to come to. They were still weak, but their eyes burned not with fear, but with the fire of those who had walked through hell and survived. The older woman, Grace, was the first to speak. Her voice was steady and deep, every word sounding carved in blood. The man who strung us up at the gate is Morrison. In town, he is a respected judge. But behind that black robe, he is a trafficker. He buys people, forges papers, turns women into property. We resisted, and this was the price. Elias clenched his jaw, veins tight across his neck. The name Morrison echoed from old war stories like the scent of death wrapped in the skin of a man. Ruby, the redhead, sat up straight, her eyes flaring with rage. He burned my home to the ground, then tried to force me to sign debt papers. I refused. That night I was dragged away to the sound of my little sister screaming. I swore I would watch him bleed. Sadie, the blonde girl, trembled as she clutched a worn scarf in her hands. I only wanted a quiet life on our little farm. He accused my father of horse theft, then took me as collateral. My father hanged himself the next day. I have nowhere left to go. The firelight danced in the dark eyes of Violet, the quietest of the five. She lowered a small leather pouch to the floor. Inside papers, land deeds, forged seals, contracts and maps evidence. We do not just carry scars. We carry proof. He thought hanging us would bury everything. But as you can see, we are still breathing. The room fell silent, save for the wind howling through cracks in the boards. Elias looked at each face. Grace, steady as stone. Ruby, burning hot. Sadie, shaken but still holding on. Violet, quiet and sharp. And Clarabelle, the black-haired one, silent as a coal about to catch flame. Clarabelle leaned toward Elias, her eyes glowing in the firelight. You thought you came here to claim a cabin. But this land, this is a battlefield, and Morrison does not allow bystanders. You cut us down. That means you chose a side. Elias said nothing. He simply reached forward, adding another log to the fire. The sparks leapt up, lighting the worn, weathered face of a frontier man. In that silence, he knew one thing for certain: his past had finally caught up to him, and fate had bound him to these 5 women, in a war that was no longer theirs alone. Thank you for being here. If this story stirred something in you, memories of dusty afternoons, the sound of hooves echoing in your chest, consider subscribing to my channel. So every day, we can sit together once more, and I will tell you another tale from the West. The next morning, the valley was cloaked in a thick, heavy fog. Elias sat on the porch step, holding a steaming cup of coffee, his Winchester resting beside him. He could hear every faint breath from inside the cabin, every small movement from the women who had just escaped the noose. But that fragile moment of peace did not last long. In the distance, hoofbeats echoed. At first, scattered, then faster, pounding like war drums. Elias set down the cup, eyes narrowing toward the dusty red trail that led into the fields. The fog began to lift, revealing 3 black horses. They stopped atop a rise, silently watching the cabin. The man in front wore a long coat, broad-shouldered and upright in the saddle. Even from a distance, Elias could see the way the man's hand rested on the grip of his revolver, calm, as if human life was just another number. Clarabelle stepped out onto the porch, her black hair tangled, still shadowing the rope-marked side of her face. She looked out and whispered, voice cold as ice, "It is Morrison. He knows we survived." Ruby rushed to the window, fury lighting up her face. "I knew it. He will not let us go. That pack of vultures will tear us apart if they get the chance." Sadie clung tightly to Grace's hand, trembling, while Violet stood still and silent, her eyes hard as polished stone. Elias looked at them, then slowly rose and reached for his Winchester. He did not need to say a word. The decision was already written in the steel of his gaze. Hoofbeats again. Not just 3, now dozens. One by one, riders emerged from the tree line, joining the formation. Torchlight flared through the mist as they spread out, slowly circling the cabin like wolves closing in on prey. Grace gripped Elias's arm. Her voice shook, but her words were firm. "You still have a way out. We do not. Go now, and you might live." Elias shook his head gently. He placed his calloused hand on the stock of his rifle, voice low and gravelly like stone rolling over stone. "I made my choice last night. This is my land now, and it is our fortress." Clarabelle looked at him, green eyes blazing in the fading firelight. She stepped closer and handed Elias a worn dagger, its blade dulled with time. "If you are going to stand with us, then know this. This is no longer about inheritance. This is war." Outside, a horse neighed loud and wild. Dust swirled, the Morrison gang descending the slope as the fog gave way to the bloodthirsty faces of men. The old cabin had become a fortress, and every breath inside was bracing for a night of fire and fury. Night fell faster than usual. Darkness swallowed the valley whole, with only the flickering torchlight of Morrison's men piercing the gloom. More than 20 gunmen stood shoulder to shoulder, their laughter loud and cruel, horses snorting and pawing at the earth like they already tasted victory. Inside the cabin, Elias checked the rounds in his Winchester, each one clicking into place with a dry, metallic snap. He looked over at the 5 women. The rope marks still marred their skin, but their eyes blazed with fire. He handed Ruby an old Colt, gave Sadie a sawed-off shotgun, slipped Violet a hunting knife and a derringer tucked into her sleeve. Grace clutched a worn-out musket, while Clarabelle gripped a Navy Colt like it was a part of her arm. "We are not just fighting to survive," Elias said, his voice low and steady. "We are fighting to end their hangman's game for good." Outside, Morrison rode forward, his voice echoing, "Hand them over. That cabin ain't yours, Ward. Cut them loose yesterday, and you signed your death warrant today." Elias stepped onto the porch, voice hoarse but unshakable. "This land belonged to Jeremiah, and now it is mine. If you want it, you'll have to go through me." Before the words had finished, a gunshot cracked the night. A bullet splintered the wooden gatepost. The wolves charged like a flood. Elias ducked back inside and slammed the door shut. Gunfire exploded. Windows shattered. Ruby screamed and fired, the shot tearing through a man scrambling onto the porch. Sadie, trembling, eyes shut tight, pulled the trigger on the shotgun. The blast blew the door apart, dropping 2 men in a red rain. Violet waited in silence. Hidden in the shadows, she struck knife, flashing into a raider's throat as he slipped inside. He thrashed, then dropped to the floor, eyes wide in shock. Grace pulled Sadie back, then lit a jar of kerosene and hurled it out the window. Flames roared up, halting the charge of the horses. Morrison barked orders, his men fanning out and firing blindly. Bullets ripped through the walls, gun smoke thick in the air, wooden shards flying like knives. Elias dropped low, calmly working the Winchester's lever. 1 shot, 1 rider falling. In the chaos, Clarabelle rushed to Elias's side, firing 2 shots. The smoke curled around her face, her green eyes lit with fury and pride in the firelight. Screams, gunshots, and hoarse cries blended into a symphony of hell. Jeremiah's old cabin was no longer a refuge. It was a burning fortress, where 1 man and 5 women turned fear into their final strength. The air was thick with gun smoke. The thunder of hooves and the cries of dying men were fading. Bodies of horses and riders lay scattered across the field, while the fire from Grace's oil jar still burned bright, casting a bloody glow across the cabin's wooden walls. And through the haze and flame, Morrison appeared tall, his black coat billowing, silver revolver gleaming in his hand. He walked forward with steady, deliberate steps, eyes cold as forged steel. When only a few yards remained, he stopped. His voice rang out like a church bell. "Ward, you think you saved them? All you've done is dig a bigger grave for them and for yourself. Around here, the law is what I say it is." Elias pushed himself up, his shoulder bleeding from a grazing shot, but his silver-gray eyes gleamed like a drawn blade. He stepped onto the porch, the weight of the Winchester heavy in his hand. Behind him, the 5 women stood tall, using the last of their strength to keep from falling. Clarabelle stepped forward, green eyes locked onto Morrison. She pulled a crumpled stack of papers from her coat, her voice clear and defiant. "You call that law? This is the truth. Forged debt contracts, fake seals, a list of every judge and sheriff you bought and paid for." Morrison hesitated, sneering, his voice dripping with scorn. "Paper won't save you when I'm still holding the gun." From the shadows, Violet stepped out, raising a silver locket. Firelight danced across its intricate engravings. "Remember this, Morrison? It belonged to Margaret, your wife. She's still alive, and she told us everything. How you faked your death to steal her father's gold mine. How every woman who stood against you disappeared." This time, Morrison's face paled. He snapped, voice sharp as a whip. "Lies. That woman died 5 years ago." Grace stepped forward, her voice sharp as a blade. "We met her in Denver, just 3 weeks ago. She signed a sworn statement, and the marshal has it now. There's nowhere left to run, Morrison." Morrison's face twitched, fear flashing for a moment, then drowned beneath fury. He let out a roar and raised his pistol at Clarabelle. In that instant, time froze. Elias moved on instinct. He shoved Clarabelle aside and raised the Winchester. 2 shots rang out loud as thunder tearing the valley apart. Morrison staggered, Elias's bullet driving deep into his shoulder, knocking the gun from his hand. Ruby stormed forward, her blue eyes blazing. "Your time is up, Morrison. From this day on, it's you who will hang." In the flickering firelight, Morrison fell to his knees, hatred burning in his eyes. In the distance, hoofbeats echoed once more, but this time, it was not his men. The marshal's riders were coming, badges shining in the moonlight. Elias lowered the Winchester, breath heavy. He knew the war might not be over yet, but the tide had turned. Morrison was no longer a powerful judge. He was just another trembling criminal, finally face to face with the justice he had long denied. The moon hung high, casting silver light across a valley still thick with the smell of gunpowder. Morrison was dragged away, his hands bound tight, his twisted face frozen in powerless rage. The few henchmen who had survived lowered their heads, unable to meet the eyes of Elias or the 5 women they had once strung up like warnings. Marshal Thompson stepped forward, silver-beard, eyes sharp as whetted steel. He gave Elias a solemn nod, then turned to Grace, Clarabelle, Ruby, Sadie, and Violet. "Justice may come late, but it comes. You did what no court dared to do. You survived, and you testified." Clarabelle raised her head, black hair falling over the rope mark on her cheek. Her voice was quiet, but solid as stone. "We didn't survive by luck. We survived because he cut the rope." All eyes turned to Elias. He stood still, blood seeping through his shirt, face weathered in the fire's dying light. He said nothing, just bowed his head. He had never expected to find meaning in a piece of inherited land, but now, the cabin was no longer a refuge for a lonely man. It had become the stronghold of justice held up by trembling hands that refused to yield. 3 days later, when the town had settled, Elias rebuilt the cabin gate. The rope that once threatened life had turned to ash. Together, he and the 5 women hammered boards, raised walls, piece by piece. With every nail driven in, they were not just building a house, they were shaping a family born from the frontier. Sadie replanted the little garden out front, her hands frail but determined. Ruby took charge of the horses, her fiery eyes shining as she watched them run. Violet spent hours sorting documents, preparing evidence to send to the courts. Grace kept the books, her voice stern yet warm, like a mother guiding the rest. And Clarabelle, she stood beside Elias each evening, her green eyes catching the last rays of sunset, a fire that refused to die. One night, by the fire, Elias looked around at them. His voice was hoarse, but strong, like a log splitting in the hearth. Some ropes are made to kill, but when you find the courage to cut them, they become the ties that bind. I thought I inherited a cabin, but the truth is, I inherited all of you. No one answered. Only Clarabelle placed her hand gently on his, her eyes glowing in the dark. And in that moment, Elias understood this wild land may be full of smoke and betrayal, but it is also the place where, through ashes and blood, people find trust again, freedom again, and family. The little cabin stood beneath the moonlight, no longer a symbol of Morrison's cruelty, but a fortress raised by those who dared to stand tall against the dark. My friend, out here in the West, land can change hands, guns can change owners, but justice belongs to those who never turn their back on one another. And sometimes the most valuable thing we inherit is the chance to become someone better. I hope you live with joy and peace in your heart. That is all I ever want from you. I love you. It has truly been an honor to share this story with you tonight. Tell me what you thought. Leave a comment below. Type the number 1 if you enjoyed this story. And do not forget to subscribe so you will not miss the next